Thanks for your company here on Richo. Just a couple of hours ago, I had a discussion with Josh Frydenberg, who's, as I think I said in the intro, one of those younger Liberals who's on the way up. There's no question about that. The trajectory is all that direction. And I talked to him about MH17. I talked to him about the budget. I think you'll find some of it a little combative, but all of it good. This bloke is a very, very clever guy. Sometimes you might say a bit too smart for me. Have a look at this. Josh Frydenberg, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you, Richo.
Now, obviously, foreign affairs has just jumped up the ladder in terms of what's interesting people today, and obviously the tragedy of MH17 has lifted foreign affairs right into the forefront. I'm just wondering on what you think about the United Nations. I mean, there are a couple of spectacular things there this week. I mean, I think the speech of the Dutch Foreign Minister is one of the best speeches I've ever heard in my life, ever, just sensational. But then you had Australia drafting that resolution, and Julie Bishop speaking very, very forcefully, and you get a unanimous decision from the UN Security Council. Does that decision matter? Will it in any way, do you believe, affect what happens on the ground in the Ukraine?
Oh, absolutely, Richo. I think Julie Bishop deserves a lot of credit, so too our ambassador there at the UN, Gary Quinlan, and his whole team, because to get the agreement of 15 nations, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council and the 10 rotating members, including Australia, to a very strong binding resolution will be important if we are going to get justice for the victims, if we are going to find out who the real perpetrators of this crime are, and if we are going to secure the crash site. So this resolution is important. It's very pleasing to see some positive moves in the hours after the passing of that resolution to try to get the proper investigators into that crash site to do their important forensic work.
But it has to be now a crime scene that has been basically destroyed in terms of evidence. I mean, you've had people walking all through it. And when I saw that shot of one of these thugs, and that's all I can describe them as, you know, pulling the ring off a dead woman's finger, you just say to yourself, what hope is there for a proper investigation, irrespective of what resolutions are passed in whatever forum?
Well, there's no doubt that the crime scene has been tampered with and important evidence would have been lost. At the same time, it is a huge scene. There are obviously a lot of fragments left from the plane, and there will be evidence that is important in tracing what exactly happened to MH17. So I think while we have seen a very unfortunate situation there on the crash site, all is still not lost, and forensic experts will be able to, I think, find some very useful evidence.
Well, look, I hope you're right, but it makes you wonder how you actually get to that point. You've got to deal with the Ukrainian government, you've got to deal with the Russian government, and you've got to deal with this, whatever you call it, government in that eastern part of the Ukraine, because there's a bloke that set himself up as some sort of leader there, with one would imagine no public approval. He's just self-approved, if you like. He's just announced the fact that he's the boss.
Well, the key here are the Russians, because Vladimir Putin can send a very strong message to those Russian-backed separatist rebels who control that part of eastern Ukraine, that the crash site needs to be unimpeded, that access needs to be gained for those international experts. And that's what Tony Abbott was getting at, Richo, when he said that Vladimir Putin made all the right sounds and noises and comments when they spoke on the phone, but the real test will be what happens next, and that's what we'll see in coming days.
Yes, I think Tony Abbott said first the crime, then the cover-up, and I think that's always the problem. Last question on the MH17, then. There seems to be a number of opinions on this, and I'm going to ask every poly I speak to over the course of the next month or so. Do you believe that we should be having Vladimir Putin on our soil or inviting him? You see, I doubt that he'll come to countries like this where there's going to be a pretty cool reception and likely demonstrations. I think he'll find a way to send his foreign minister and not turn up himself. But if you don't invite him, then in that way you send some sort of direct protest. Do you think that's likely from Australia's point of view, and would you support such a move?
Look, it's a watching brief Richo. We have to see what transpires over the coming weeks and months as we lead into the G20 summit in Brisbane in November. You're right, Vladimir Putin, whatever happens, I suppose, over the coming period of time, will get a cool reception from a number of Australians. It's not Australia's decision to make unilaterally about who attends the summit. Russia is one of the G20 countries, but I don't think we want to take that final decision at an international level until closer to the date.
It was interesting that Julie Bishop didn't rule it out, though, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and Warren Truss as well has made very strong comments about the reception Vladimir Putin would get in Australia were he to come here. So I think we'll just have to see what happens between now and then. But you're right, there will be many people in Australia who do not want to see Vladimir Putin attend the G20.
No. Can I turn to some domestic issues? You know, there's a great line in the scripture, there are none so blind as those who will not see. How do you get Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey to face the fact that A, most of that budget's not going to get through the Senate, but B, it is that very budget that is the reason for your drop in the polls, the reason for unpopularity?
Well, firstly, over the past week or two, when the Parliament was sitting, we had some success in the Senate. We were able to repeal the carbon tax, and the changes that we made to Labor's Future of Financial Advice, FOFA reforms, went through the Senate. In both cases, there were lots of doubters, people who said that we weren't going to succeed with those two pieces of regulations and legislation. So I haven't lost hope about how we negotiate the passage of some of our key budget measures through the Senate. The Palmer United Party can negotiate with us in good faith, we hope. We've found that both Bob Day and David Leonhelm have been good partners on in some of the discussions to date. The key thing about the budget is it does set Australia up for a more prosperous future, whether it's our commitment to pay back nearly $300 billion worth of Labor debt, whether it's some of our measures to boost participation in the workplace, particularly the earn or learn strategies, or the measures to get older Australians over the age of 50 who are unemployed back into the workforce with incentives to employers, whether it's the record spending on infrastructure, whether it's even the deregulation of the university sector. We stand by these initiatives. I think it was a very good budget, and we need to continue to press our case in the Senate.
Oh, but look, I mean, seriously, Josh, and you're a pretty bright fella, you're a lot brighter than I am. How do you sell things like paid parental leave when you are saying to a family out there in the suburbs on average weekly earnings, which is 60-something thousand on a single income, you can have a baby and we'll give you nothing. But if a woman's out there earning 100 grand a year, we'll give her 50 grand, she can have 6 months off. How do you do that? And then also, how do you justify spending $4 or $5 billion a year on it when you're telling us we're broke and we've got to get the deficit down straight away? How do you manage those two contrary messages all at the same time?
Well, the key thing about the paid parental leave scheme, Richo, is that it does boost workforce participation. It does enable more women to stay in the workforce after having children. And if you look around the world, Australia is an outlier in having a paid parental leave scheme at just minimum wage in just 18 weeks, as opposed to the 6 months, the half a year that the World Health Organisation has recommended.
Yeah, so but if we're broke, Josh, and you're telling me we are, you're the one saying this is a real crisis and it's a crisis today, how can we afford it? How do we justify that?
Well, I think it's going to actually have positive spin-offs for the economy because if you look where Australia is compared to other commensurate countries like Canada, we are below those countries in terms of the percentage of women who are in the workforce. So if you can keep more women in the workforce, if you can keep more seniors in the workforce, if you can get more unemployed back into the workforce, then that has huge payoffs for the Australian economy. So while there is a line item in the budget and it does cost some money up front, I think the long-term benefits for the economy do justify something like the paid parental leave scheme.
Yeah, but one thing you can't justify is the answer to this question. Why would one baby be worth more than another? Why is one baby more precious than another?
Well, as you know, the vast majority of people who receive the paid parental leave scheme will not be receiving that maximum amount of $50,000. So, you know, it is skewing the debate somewhat to focus on just those small number of people who are getting it at the higher income levels. And the reason why we have adopted that type of scheme is because we're saying it's a workplace entitlement. This is not middle class welfare. This is about a workplace entitlement, just like sick leave is, just like long service leave is.
It does value one child at more than another, and that I think is a fundamental problem. But I know we're not going to settle that argument today. Last question though, I pick up the Fin Review today and I see that Joe Hockey doesn't think the budget was tough enough. He thinks Tony Abbott watered it down too far. How tough do you blokes want to get? You've gone from a massive victory to 54-46 down in both the polls now. And how tough do you want to get? I mean, you're going to get so tough you'll get yourselves beaten.
No, I think what we've actually put forward to the Australian people is a good budget that has an element of long-term fiscal consolidation as well as some nation-building projects. I don't want to go into what some of the discussions may or may not have been in the lead up to the budget behind closed doors at ERC meetings or cabinet meetings. What actually really matters is what the budget looked like on budget night. And while you're right, we have had some opposition in some quarters, and particularly finding it tough in the Senate, the last couple of weeks have shown that we can get good outcomes in the Senate, and we'll continue to press our case in the months ahead.
Josh, I've got to leave it there, but let's face it, you got the carbon tax up because with Palmer you've got a great big coal miner. And it was the last thing he was ever going to do was knock over a tax he never wanted to pay. So I don't
Richo,
you were always going to win it.
But Richo, let me just say to you, it's fine for the Labor Party to block some of our key spending measures, spending reduction measures, but what is their alternative? I mean, there is $5 billion, Richo, of their own spending cuts that they took to the last election that they're blocking
I understand that, and I haven't supported all of that.
And that's a key point.
But I haven't supported all of that.
We have to ask what the alternative is.
In fact, I've suggested all the way through that Labor should not have opposed the repeal of the carbon tax because I do believe you have a mandate for it. So it's not as if I agree with all that Labor's doing. It's just that I've got a fundamental position that you and I will disagree with. You have brought down an unfair budget. Australia is punishing you for it, and I think in that sense you, as not in a personal you but a collective you, deserve it. And that's where you and I will have to disagree. But I do have to leave it there. And
Thanks,
Josh, we'll get a chance to talk again. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to be with you, Richo. Thank you.
You know, I can remember when I was Secretary of the Labor Party and then a senior official and had a bit of influence. I used to get up at state conferences of the Labor Party and federal conferences and defend the indefensible, and I could make virtue out of outrage. But I've got to say, it's an impossible task on this budget. Josh Frydenberg is as good as they get. But defending some of those things like the paid parental leave scheme is just plain impossible. I'll be back in just a moment with Sam Dastyari.